The first primitive stone tools were made over 3 million years ago in what is now Kenya. These early humans were likely members of the genus Australopithecus. However, it was Homo erectus who began making more sophisticated tools during the Lower Paleolithic period about 1.8 million years ago. They created sharp implements from flint and chert, which they used to cut animal carcasses into pieces for easier consumption and as weapons for hunting. The first evidence of these more advanced tools has been found in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. As time went on, Homo erectus started venturing out of Africa, and by 1.2 million years ago, they had reached the Middle East, where they continued their tradition of making stone tools. In fact, this region would become one of the most important early centers of technology until the end of the Paleolithic. Although Homo sapiens did not emerge in the Near East until about 40,000 years ago, later waves of migration from Africa brought our species into a world that was already filled with the discarded remnants of our ancestors' stone tools. But we weren't just living off their scraps. Long before our emergence, Homo erectus had passed down their knowledge and traditions of toolmaking to other human relatives, such as the Neanderthals. This means that when Homo sapiens arrived in Europe, we quickly began making our own tools instead of relying on the discarded tools left behind by previous occupants. One of the most iconic tool types from the Lower Paleolithic is the hand axe. These teardrop-shaped tools were expertly crafted by early humans with keen edges capable of cutting through flesh and bone. But while scientists have long assumed that hand axes were primarily used as weapons and tools for hunting, archaeologists are beginning to think that they may have had a ceremonial function as well. Some scholars even believe that the act of creating these beautiful symmetrical tools was an important part of the manufacturing process. In other words, early humans didn't just make tools because they needed something to help them survive. Creating these tools was a way of expressing their creativity and beauty too. In fact, there is evidence that Neanderthals took great pride in their tools as well. They would often bury them in layers of dirt or clay so that they wouldn't be lost, and on occasion, they placed them inside a circle, suggesting that they wanted to create a special place for them. These burial practices indicate that stone tools held some sort of importance to early humans beyond their immediate use. For example, in the spring of 2016, archaeologists discovered a set of 7 carefully arranged hand axes near the remains of a building in the Palestinian city of Jericho. 4 of these axes dated back 120,000 years, which means they were made before Homo sapiens arrived in the region. The other 3 were newer, dating back only 40,000 years. It seems likely that these axes weren't just tools. Instead, they may have served as symbolic objects in a ritualistic ceremony. The oldest tools could have been placed there by Neanderthals, and then the younger ones by humans. But if that's true, how did these early humans go about making stone tools? Well, first they had to find a rock that they liked. Flint and chert were ideal because they were hard and easy to shape. Once they had selected their rock, they would strike one side with a hammerstone until it broke apart. This process is called knapping, and it requires a bit of skill and know-how, but it also allows the ancient craftsman to put his or her own stamp on the finished product. After breaking up the flint, the artisan would continue chipping away at it with smaller hammers until it was exactly the shape they wanted. In fact, some archaeologists suggest that each chip left on a piece of flint tells the story of its maker. By carefully analyzing the scars left behind on an ancient tool, it's possible to tell where it was made, what materials were available at the time, and how many people worked on it. In other words, these everyday items can reveal flashes of insight into the lives of those who lived thousands of years ago. But how do we know that early humans didn't just use their tools for basic tasks like hunting and gathering? Some scholars argue that if these tools were nothing more than utilitarian objects, there's no reason why they should have been buried or hidden away. However, critics of this view contend that early humans may have viewed their tools as sacred objects that shouldn't be left out in the open where they could become damaged or defaced. In either case, it's clear that stone tools meant more to early humans than just being useful objects. And as humans spread throughout the old world, they continued to perfect their craft. Not only were they able to make more durable tools, but they also developed new methods of knapping. In France, for instance, artisans would take 2 pieces of flint and strike them together in order to create flakes of varying thicknesses. This technique was likely developed independently several times throughout history. It first appeared around 900,000 years ago in Africa and again 400,000 years ago in France. But despite its usefulness, it wasn't widely adopted. Only a few isolated instances of this style of toolmaking have been found anywhere in the world. So why did humans develop new methods of making tools only to abandon them shortly thereafter? Some scholars suggest that this happened due to changes in climate and vegetation across the globe. As the world became drier and colder, large game animals became rarer, which meant that early humans needed to find new ways of getting food. With less meat available, they had to rely more on plants for nutrition, which required different tools and techniques. For example, they may have used their handy stone tools to crack open nuts and seeds, then ground them into a powder using a flat stone. These innovations allowed early humans to adapt to the changing world and survive. It also helped that they were able to share ideas and resources with neighboring groups. In the Near East, for example, humans and Neanderthals lived alongside each other for hundreds of thousands of years. During that time, they almost certainly traded goods and knowledge, including techniques for making stone tools. After all, both cultures needed similar technologies to get food and defend themselves against predators. So it's possible that humans learned how to make better stone tools from the Neanderthals. Of course, this isn't the only theory about why early humans experimented with different technologies. Some scholars argue that they simply enjoyed the process of making beautiful objects. For them, crafting a finely honed tool was an end in itself, regardless of whether it was more efficient or not. Regardless of the reason, early humans eventually settled on the tools that they preferred. And those preferences varied depending on where they lived. For example, in Britain and Ireland, the British axe was all the rage. Its distinctive shape is characterized by a thin cutting edge on one side and a thick rounded edge on the other. Archaeologists think that this design made it easier to chop wood, which was important since trees provided both food and shelter in the cold northern climate. In contrast, the triangular arrowhead was more popular in North Africa and the Near East. It was lightweight and easy to sharpen, which made it perfect for hunting small game and for use in javelins and darts. But as the last ice age came to an end, another change swept across the old world, one that would alter the course of human history forever. Humans began experimenting with new materials for making tools such as bone, ivory, and copper. As the millennia passed, these raw materials became more readily available and easier to work with. Early humans learned how to heat up flint and make it harder, a process known as flint knapping. They also developed more sophisticated techniques for shaping bone and ivory into various tools and ornaments. Meanwhile, the ability to smelt copper ushered in a new era of technology. Humans were now able to create tools and weapons that were stronger and more durable than anything they had made before. Thanks for watching. If you thought this video was interesting, please share it with your friends and subscribe for more content. We've got lots of videos about ancient humans and their mysterious behaviors. You might enjoy watching the one about the oldest cave art in the world.